Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, breaking down Rudy Gobert's contract extension, why it's a great deal for both parties. It's a great thing the Wolves got it done before the season. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the biggest concerns coming out of the opening night loss to the LA Lakers, and we'll look ahead to the Kings game tonight. Based on what happened last year against Sacramento, the changes they made in the offseason, why it's a difficult matchup for Minnesota. We get to all that here next. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Thursday, everybody. Happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves are in Sacramento to take on the Kings tonight. Lots to get to today, as I mentioned off the top. An apology again for my voice. I thought it was getting better. Apparently not. Here's hoping that this doesn't last a whole lot longer. I said this on yesterday's show, but podcasting and meetings and then yelling at 10-year-olds on a baseball field. It was not a good mix for me earlier this week, but anyway, well, hopefully it gets better. If I talk like above a decibel level like this, it gets really raspy. So I'm gonna maybe be a little more monotone on today's show than I typically would be. Anyway, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. No matter where you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that we now have a newsletter. The Locked On Wolves daily newsletter is a one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage that's delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free right now for this show and any other Locked On shows at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Okay, so let's start with the Rudy Gobert extension. Rudy signed this, or at least it broke, apparently so quickly or so close to the opener on Tuesday that Chris Finch wasn't even aware post-game that it was finalized. But it was reported by Shams Charania of ESPN that Rudy would be extending his contract with the Wolves. Of course, the what that did is it essentially bought out his player option for next year. You'll remember he had a player option for $46.7 million for next season. And it was always kind of assumed that they would explore an extension, both so they didn't lose him in a year and also potentially to bring down the average annual value of that contract. And that's exactly what they were able to do. Gobert was in 25-26, so a year from now, he was going to make $46.7 million. Now it's a 3-year, $110 million contract, which means that number for each of those 3 years is in the 33-ish million dollar, or sorry, 30. I used to be like 36 and a half or so million on average each year. So that brings down the cap hit for next year about $10 million less than what it would have been, which really matters for a team that is over the apron. So next year, let's see, he was going to make 43.7, 43.8. According to Spot Track, next year, Gobert will make $33.9 million. So it goes from basically a third of the Wolves cap to like 22% of their cap, which will matter. Now, here's why it's good for Rudy. He gets security beyond next year. So he would have been a free agent at age 34 had he played out his option year next year at, 40, whatever it was, 40, what did I say? 47 million. And he now has, he has security, through he would have been 34 as a free agent the following summer. So the year after next year. Now he won't be a free agent until he's 36. It's probably, not very many 7-footers play much past the age of 36, and certainly wouldn't in free agency be making 36, 39. Like the last year of this deal, he's still going to make 39 million, which by the way is only going to be about 20% of the Wolves cap projected at that point. We don't know for sure what it'll be in 2028. But it will go up. And so 39 million won't be as impactful against the cap then as it would be now. So all that to say, it gives him security beyond next year. It allows him to play until he's 36 and still make north of $30 million a year, even if it's less than what he's making this year or what he would have made next year. For the team, it provides cost certainty. There's no question about like what's going to happen. Is he going to opt in? Is he going to opt out? Do we have to still negotiate this extension. It's done. They now have it on the books for this season plus 3 more. And obviously they save roughly, I guess, a little bit more than $10 million for next year. Because it would have been almost 47 million, and now it's going to be basically 34 million. So like they save 13 million against the cap next year, and they know what that number is the 2 years following that. So there's no question about what that's going to be. As far as what the impact could be next year on keeping other players like Naz Reid, we know Naz Reid has a player option for next season. He's making just under 14 million this year. Next year, he has a player option for $15 million. If he has another great year this year, he probably would be looking to opt out. He would be looking to opt out and gain, entering his prime. He'll be 26 next year as a free agent. Prime years, how much could he make? Could he make 25 million? Could he make 30 million on the open market? Now it at least gives the Wolves a puncher's chance to retain him. Although Julius Randle's in a similar situation, but he's twice as expensive. Randle's making 33 million this year. His player option for next year is actually only 30.9 million. So it would go down. There's almost no way he accepts that unless he gets hurt this year, right? If he, God forbid, tears an ACL tonight, whatever, which I hate that I said that. But if he gets hurt, then obviously he's going to opt in for next year at $31 million. But if he doesn't, as long as he has a decent year, he's going to be a free agent and be looking for a last big contract as a 31-year-old. The Wolves will not be able to retain both Naz and Julius Randle. I'm fairly confident, even with the Gobert extension. The other free agency piece to think about would be Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's only making $4.3 million this year on that bargain deal that Tim Conley signed him to a little over a year ago. He's only going to be 27. So he'll be smack dab in the middle of his prime, or really the early part of his prime. And I had before the cat trade, I had said, look, there's no way that the Wolves retain Alexander Walker because he's going to make at least 3, if not 4 times that on the open market, assuming he has a year similar to last year, continues to shoot the ball at an above average clip from 3. He's going to make 15, 18 million next year. He just is. Now, without Cat and with the Gobert extension, I think it kind of looks like, and this is so early, we're talking about 9 months from now, basically. The most likely scenario sitting here right now is that the Wolves retain one of Randle or Naz, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a real possibility. Now, if Josh Minott eventually steps into a role or whatever, or now that they have DiVincenzo, I don't think keeping Alexander Walker is a must. And depending on how this year goes, there's a point at which do we need to spend 18 million on him if we've got Jaden and we've got DiVincenzo and we've got TJ Shannon because we like him or whatever? Does it make more sense to keep Randle and Reid and let Alexander Walker walk? So there's options. Likely it's 2 of the 3 of them. And sitting here right now, it seems most likely that it's one of the 2 bigs, Randle or Reid, plus Alexander Walker. But again, it depends on how the year shakes out for especially DiVincenzo. If TJ Shannon or Josh Minott ever gets rotation minutes, those are guys who could effectively, basically provide a facsimile of what Nickeil Alexander-Walker does from a role perspective. Now, I guess the difference is Alexander Walker does initiate offense. Josh Minott's not going to do that. But between DiVincenzo and Minott, could you cobble together enough insurance for him if he leaves in free agency? I think the answer is probably yes, if this year plays out according to plan. But if nothing else, the Gobert deal is definitely a good thing for the Wolves for no other reason than it lowers the cap hit for next year, and it gives them some cost certainty for the next 3 seasons beyond this one. And it's a good deal for Rudy because he's getting paid $30+ million a year through his age 36 season. Or I guess through his age 35 season until he turns 36 around the time of free agency in 2028. So it's a win all the way around, and it allows the Wolves some additional flexibility. All right, I want to talk about a couple takeaways from the Lakers game on Tuesday. And some of the things the Wolves really struggled with on Tuesday, they need to figure out before they play the Kings on Thursday night. I think that it's a scary matchup to have at this point already, game 2, just because some of the stuff that the Kings can capitalize on are things that the Wolves really struggle with on Tuesday. So we'll talk about that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. No matter what kind of live events you like going to, they've got them there, and Gametime Picks will curate the list to make it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. All of the above and more is right there at Gametime. Plus, they're all in pricing. If you toggle on that option, You'll be able to see your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. It's a great way to shop so you're not surprised at the end of the transaction. Plus, with their seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee also means that Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better price somewhere else. And they have the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, so your purchase is covered with Gametime ticket coverage. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Okay, let's talk Wolves Kings. Well, actually, let's go back a half beat here and talk about Wolves Lakers on Tuesday, and then relate that to the Kings matchup. So we'll start first with the biggest issues from Tuesday. And I harped on. I know a lot of the focus was on the offensive flow, and that's absolutely a thing. The reason why I'm not like panicking about the offensive flow, maybe as much as is out there, and all the questions that were asked Chris Finch on Tuesday after the game, is because it wasn't really good for big chunks of last year anyway. So taking out Karl-Anthony Towns and inserting Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, this thing wasn't going to look super great on night one. It just never was. I said as much on X on Tuesday. So the key here is to not fall into terrible habits so early in the season, because they can still win games with bad offensive flow because they have so many talented one-on-one players. So obviously Anthony Edwards, Julius Randle, like they can score because, and like you could even add in DiVincenzo, like they've got enough talent to score in one-on-one situations and broken floor situations. They're trying to play faster. So they're going to win some of these games, even when the offense is putrid. I mean, they were still in the game on Tuesday. And Chris Finch talked after the game about, look, our flow wasn't good. When we got open shots, we missed them. And Ant said something like, hey, if we hit open shots, we win the game. That's true. I mean, there were a couple missed wide open 3-point attempts late in the game. I think Alexander Walker, Ant had a couple. Like if they knock those down, they maybe still win, and they did not deserve to win. They did not deserve to win. So while the offensive flow is an issue and has been, you could go back over a year, and I realize we're talking about a 56-win team that went to the conference finals last year, but they also were 16th in offense. And they were so good in the regular season because their defense was legit dominant, and because they had the guy they could go to when things weren't working. And even it's ironic, right? Because sometimes Ant is the reason the offense doesn't have flow because the ball sticks with him, but he can shoot the team's way out of these issues. Ant can put the team on his back and carry them to a win. And last year it was Cat occasionally, and this year it could be Randall. They're going to find a way. They have so much talent on this team and so much individual talent. They're going to win some of these games, and it's going to mask the issues. Like Ant's comments after the game were very different than Chris Finch's. Ant was like, we just missed some shots. Chris Finch was like, look, we didn't get good shots for most of the game. So the hope is that doesn't take hold. The hope is that Ant doesn't. Oh, and I don't mean to completely pick on Ant, but he is the best player in the team, right? So they need to make sure to not become complacent. Like if they beat the Kings, by a bucket and the offensive flow still isn't good, and then they're 1-1, and it's like, okay, we're going back home. We're going to start winning. There could be a false sense of like, all right, our offense is fine if you win some of these games. And that to me is the most dangerous thing about the offense. I'm not necessarily worried that game one of having a new second option on the floor and, another 6th man of the year type player in Dante DiVincenzo along with Nas, like, I'm not going to pull the fire alarm on the offense. I'm going to pull the fire alarm on them realizing that the offense was never really all that good last year anyway. And I'm sure Chris Finch knows that, but I wonder, like, does the team, do the players really internalize that and understand that needs to improve? And then the thing that I focused on Tuesday, which is my biggest concern, is summed up best by the phrase lack of effort. And when I say that, I don't simply mean they didn't try hard enough. I know that it's kind of the same thing, but let me add some color to that. Like, there's several areas where that comes through, because I'm not suggesting they didn't play hard for 48 minutes. I'm suggesting that there was like basically a quarter and a half stretch where they just didn't get to loose balls. They didn't rebound. And the Lakers built this massive lead that the Wolves had to claw back from. And yes, they got to within 4, and they were only down 8 with 4 minutes left, and they had a shot, right? But the lead was built because there was terrible transition defense. And the poor offense led to those transition opportunities for LA. Awful defensive rebounding. The Lakers crushed the offensive glass early in the game. And if you look at the box score, I know the Wolves ended up +1 on the boards. I know that they were only like -3 on the offensive board, something like that. But in the first half, it was miserable when the Lakers built this lead. And just, I mentioned 50-50 balls, loose balls in general. Just all of those things to me fall under lack of effort. And there's obviously other factors, like rebounding isn't only effort, but it's the biggest factor within effort. And I could lump communication in with that. Like I gave an example on Tuesday's show right after the game, like, or I guess it would have been Wednesday's show after Tuesday's game, like where guys just weren't communicating who's boxing out who, right? Like they're doing a good job of contesting threes on the perimeter, but then everybody's in no man's land. Nobody's what I like to call the Andrew Wiggins, which is you contest and you watch from the 3-point line. You don't run back on offense. You don't crash the glass on defense. You just hang out and hope for a long rebound. And then inevitably what happens is you get one, but it goes 12 feet right in front of the free throw line. And, somebody on the offense grabs it and you're up a creek and they get a second chance opportunity and likely second chance points. So there was some bad technique mixed in there, but the effort level, which again, like you could say this is similar to offense in the sense where, like I'm not suggesting I'm not pulling the fire alarm on the offense will always be bad this year. I'm also not saying they'll never try hard. Like that's not at all the point. But we're going to talk about the Kings here in a minute. This is something that is easily fixable, right? Like if the Wolves play hard in the second quarter of that game against the Lakers, they probably win that game. Very likely win that game. And it's frustrating when it boils down to that. That's seriously my argument because they have enough talent to win a game when the offensive flow isn't there, and they still generated enough open opportunities late in the game that they still could have won the game. And it's never just one thing. But if I could boil it down to, the one phrase, one category, it's going to be the effort level. And then offensively, like some of the stuff that led to the turnovers, Chris Finch talked a lot about this. You don't need to regurgitate Chris Finch's press conference, but lack of movement, sticky ball, which a lot of the times was Ant, but it wasn't exclusively Ant. I mean, Nas is occasionally guilty of it. Certainly Julius Randle, at times Dante DiVincenzo. And I thought for the most part, the quality of the 3-point shots was okay. I don't think it ever devolved into chucking. I talked about Ant maybe shooting 2 to 3 too many mid-range shots in this game. I think that's been a consistent theme for a while now. So I don't know. As long as the offensive flow picks up a little bit and there's less of those silly turnovers, then some of this other stuff matters less. Those are kind of the two big things coming out of the game on Tuesday. All right. Next, I want to talk about the Kings matchup. I want to talk about what to look for. And based on last year's games against Sacramento, why the effort issues and the transition defense issues and the rebounding issues are all concerns of mine against a team like Sacramento. We'll talk about all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. All you have to do is get as little as 4 correct picks. You can get up to 100 times your money. It seriously is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy as well. So your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets hurt. If a player leaves in the first half due to injury and does not return, PrizePicks will help keep your lineup live. It's the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Sign up today, get $50 instantly when you play $5. All you can do is play $5. You get $50 instantly. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Okay, let's talk Wolves Kings. So last season, the Wolves and Kings only played 3 times. So remember, the first one was the in-season tournament game in mid-November. The Wolves came into it 11-3. It was their first home loss. They've been 7-0 on their home floor to that point and played a ton of home games earlier in the season. And the Kings ran all over them. They jumped up 7 in the first quarter. It was a 6-point game at halftime, and then they pulled away. It was a double-digit game going to the fourth quarter, and it was close-ish. They ended up losing by 13, but it was a track meet for the Kings. And I had come into the season saying, I think, what did I say before the season last year? I thought Sacramento and Phoenix would be the 2 toughest potential playoff matchups for Minnesota, right? And I was worried about Phoenix and their mid-range prowess, which ended up, of course, not being a concern in the first round of the playoffs, even though they struggled against them in the regular season, right? And then the Kings didn't end up making the playoffs for a variety of reasons, but were a tough matchup in the regular season for Minnesota. De'Aaron Fox in this game had 36 points, 12 assists, 7 rebounds, was a plus 19, 14 of 32 shooting. The Kings had a very slight fast break edge over Minnesota, but it's not simply transition, actual fast break points. It's just the overall pace at which they play, the number of possessions that they get. They shot 18 more attempts from the field in this game than Minnesota. And Minnesota, 18 more attempts, and they had 4 more offensive rebounds, but still 18 more attempts overall, in part because of the offensive rebounds, in part because of the Wolves turnovers. Minnesota had 18 turnovers against Sacramento. So basically, this box score from the first game last year against Sacramento is not too dissimilar from the box score for Wolves-Lakers on Tuesday. It was a very similar formula. The Wolves turned it over a bunch. Sacramento ran a bunch. The Wolves actually, they didn't shoot the ball great, but they weren't terrible. There were some elements of this game last year that weren't awful for Minnesota. Ant had 35 himself. He got to the line 18 times against Sacramento. The Wolves out free throwed Sacramento 29-11 and lost the game by 13. So the Kings matchup presents some unique challenges overall. And I thought the first game last year was the best way of pointing that out. The only player missing, by the way, for Minnesota was Jaden McDaniels. He was in and out with I think it was a hamstring or quad. I think it was a hamstring early last year. The second game between the two teams, it wasn't until December, and there was no Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't remember why he didn't play in this game. I think he tweaked something. This was around Christmas. Remember, he tweaked something the night before or 2 nights before, and he just missed a random game. It was before the longer knee injury. So there's no Cat, and the Wolves won by 12. Ant had 34 and 10 assists, 34 on 27 shots. He was 3 of 12 on 3 in this game on threes. De'Aaron Fox had 27, but nobody else really came to the party for Sacramento. Keegan Murray had 20. And Domantas had 17, 10, and 10, a triple-double. So I guess, they did get a little bit of additional production. But the Wolves won in Sacramento in this game by 12. Then the last time they played was toward the end of the season. No Karl-Anthony Towns for Minnesota, and Anthony Edwards left at halftime for personal reasons. The Wolves had gotten down early and were only down 1 at halftime. Ant leaves at halftime, and the Wolves still force overtime and ultimately lose to Sacramento. So the Kings win 2 out of 3. Oh, and this is also important. De'Aaron Fox didn't play in that game. So you had one game with fully healthy minus Jaden McDaniels. Wolves lose at home by 13. You have another game in Sacramento, no Cat. Wolves win by 12. Then the last game is you get no Cat, half a game of Ant, and the Kings have no Fox. In Minnesota, the Wolves lose in overtime. And in that game specifically, Malik Monk went nuts. He had 39 points off the bench, probably trying to surpass Naz Reid in the 6th Man of the Year voting. He legit thought he should have won it, which is funny. But he had 39 against the Wolves in this game. So the Kings last year were a top-tier rebounding team, really on both ends of the floor. They were number 1 in defensive rebound rate, the Kings were. And they were 14 in offensive rebound rate. So offensive rebounding isn't a big part of the Wolves' strategy. I talked about this against certain teams like corner crashing and some of that stuff where they could pick up some easy buckets that way for an offense that can struggle, as we saw on Tuesday. The defensive rebounding thing concerns me less because the Wolves aren't going to game plan to try and score off offensive rebounds intentionally. The offensive rebounding rate of the Kings is concerning to me because that's an area the Wolves struggle, defensive rebounding. We saw this against the Lakers on Tuesday. Now, roster-wise, the Kings look pretty similar to how they looked last year. They don't have Harrison Barnes. They do have DeMar DeRozan. We'll get to DeRozan here in a second. But rebounding-wise, this should be just as strong this year. Domantas Sabonis is obviously a load. They've got, Barnes rebounded his position well, but they've got other guys that rebound their position well. And, still have bigs. The backup big situation looks a little different in Sacramento this year. But rebounding to me is the biggest part in this game. You can't let them get those easy second chance opportunities, especially for a team that's already going to push the pace and try and get more possessions than you. Across the 3 games last year against Sacramento, Minnesota was a minus 11 on the offensive glass. There was one game they out-rebounded Minnesota by 6, another one they had them by 1, another game they had them by 4. So all 3 games, Sacramento gained across the 3 games, 11 possessions off offensive rebounds. The Wolves have to rebound their positions. They have to crash the glass. Defensively, they have to end possessions when they get the initial stop. They're already going to generate more possessions with the speed they play with. Now, the Kings last year, pace-wise, actually ended up, what were they? They were only 14th. The year prior, they were 12th, according to Basketball Reference. So, but again, it's not straight up transition opportunities. It's just the speed that they have as a team, the team speed of De'Aaron Fox, the team speed that involves Keegan Murray. The Wolves have to be able to keep up with them. And I know the Wolves want to run more this year offensively themselves. I don't know this is the right spot for it because the Kings are going to grab a rebound because they're a great defensive rebounding team, push the pace the other way and score on you in transition. I would be very cautious against trying to run too much against Sacramento. So the biggest keys for me are defensive rebounding, which would be a major challenge against the Kings, and the Wolves were terrible at it on Tuesday. And then transition defense. Again, something they were really good at last year. And as we know, awful 2 years ago, but much better last year. Very good transition defense, but awful on Tuesday against the Lakers. So those are the 2 biggest keys. Slowing down De'Aaron Fox is absolutely a challenge. I would imagine Jaden McDaniels gets the first crack, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker is going to play a huge role in checking De'Aaron Fox. And I don't think it's a Josh Minott moment. I don't think that's the right matchup for him. But if Jaden McDaniels gets into quick foul trouble, I said this on Wednesday's show, the post-game pod after Tuesday's loss, if effort becomes an issue, if rebounding is an issue again, Josh Minott's the guy that does those 2 things as good as anybody pound for pound on this roster. Josh Minott will deserve an opportunity if it's not in this game. And I actually predicted this on Wednesday's show that if the Wolves say they get down 8 at the end of the first quarter in Sacramento's home opener, there's going to be a lot of emotion there. The Wolves had to do the Lakers opener Tuesday and Sacramento's home opener Thursday. DeMar DeRozan's debut in Sacramento. The Wolves get down, call it 8-ish at the end of the first quarter. You may see Josh Minott cameo. Josh Minott, Joe Ingles go out there, like inject some energy, inject some rebounding, inject some playmaking when it comes to Ingles. But we could see Josh Minott's first minutes of the regular season if that were to happen. Last thing, DeMar DeRozan always seems to play well against the Wolves, in part because the Wolves give up shots that he likes to take. And it's a hard habit to shake to just like not give a free. Let me rephrase that. The Wolves don't intentionally give up open mid-range jumpers, but they try and funnel teams to shooting them, right? It's not an unusual strategy. But DeMar DeRozan, if he's in pick and roll and you're in a drop and, Rudy drops, like he'll take that 16-footer happily all day long, and he's good at it. So that's probably the Jaden McDaniels matchup. And then Ant probably guards De'Aaron Fox first thing, and they can kind of flip that. And obviously the Wolves are very switchable on the perimeter, and Mike Conley should be able to hold his own. But he's not going to guard him for 30 minutes, especially after really struggling in just 20 minutes on Tuesday. So it'll take a village to slow down De'Aaron Fox, as it always does, but expect the Wolves to switch a bunch on the perimeter, with it initially being Ant's assignment with Jaden on DeMar DeRozan early. But again, switchability on the perimeter is going to be key. All right, that's all we got for you today on the show. The the postcast will be live on YouTube on Locked On Sports Minnesota, and that audio will be right here on this feed tonight. I don't know if it's Jack or if it's Luke Inman, but Sam Ekstrom. I think it's always Luke hosting. Those guys will be live on YouTube, and then that audio will be on this feed tonight. I'll have the postgame pod for you late tonight / early Friday morning as well. So be sure to tune in for that. Also, the last episode in this audio feed is the Minnesota basketball party, which is back. I will typically be on that on Wednesdays. Was not on the show this week, but that's usually a Wednesday morning live YouTube show that then the audio also hits this feed. So be sure to follow and subscribe to that as well. And then one more reminder that we now have a newsletter as well, introducing the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter, a one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. That's all we got for you today here on the show. A reminder that Locked On Wolves can be listened to anywhere you get your podcast. You can also watch on YouTube and, of course, the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.